Afternoon, friends and neighbors. I am going to share some of my gardening tips with you. I've had multiple people contact me recently about some tips on getting started with a garden. And I'm not going to show my face because I've been sick and I look terrible. But as you know, the price of groceries and everything else has been going really high, and it will probably get worse. But a lot of people are interested in growing some food in their backyard. And so I've got questions on things to start with, or what kind of wood to use, building the raised beds. And, you can just get a tiller and do the old-fashioned way, but I'm telling you, raised bed gardening is much easier. There's a lot less weeds. You have a lot more control. You can grow a lot more food in a small space. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, the price of wood is probably still real high, as I mentioned, but there are other things you can use besides wood. So we're going to look at several different options. And the first thing I'm going to look at is what I used for my garden bed. I hope you guys can see this. I'm not sure this is big enough. Let me see if I can zoom in a little. Let me do that one more time. Yeah, that's pretty good. You should be able to see that, I hope. And this is what I did. I had some leftover 4x4s that someone gave me, and I wanted my beds 20 inches tall. And I wanted that so I could sit on a little stool and just lean over and work the beds, and not have to bend down lower to the ground. That's when wood was cheaper, of course. And so I did my beds 20 inches tall. So I cut my 4x4s off at 20 inches, and then I bought 2x10s because I wanted it to be sturdy and last for multiple years. And untreated wood, don't use treated wood. I bought 2x10s. I had Lowe's cut them to the desired length, so I didn't have to do any cutting. I had them cut the desired length for the end of the beds. And I just had to come home and screw it all together. And so I stacked two 2x10s high, and that made my 20 inches. And then I did the beds 2 foot wide because I had a fence around the outer edge. But a good width is to do 4 foot wide or 3 foot wide if you can reach in from either side. And so 20 inches is a lot of dirt to fill that with. You don't need that much dirt for a garden bed. So I filled in the bottom of it with old dead branches and twigs and leaves and things like that. And then as it breaks down, it adds a lot of nutrients and stuff to your soil. So I just did like the top 8 inches with dirt. And we'll talk about a dirt mix in a little while. But this is how I built my beds, and filled up the bottom of them with sticks and leaves and stuff like that. First you put down a layer of cardboard to kind of kill out the weeds, and then you fill it full of sticks and leaves and stuff like that, and then you put dirt on the top, and you make your own dirt. That's how you have a lot less weeds, and I'll tell you what to use for that here in a minute. But you only need 6 inches of dirt to grow most vegetables. You only need more than that if you're growing root vegetables like carrots and potatoes and sweet potatoes. But everything else, you basically just need 6 inches of dirt. But I did 8 to 10 inches just to be safe. So that's how I did that. Here's another little sample. And what they did was they raised a little bit of a frame higher and put screen around it to try to keep out any critters. It just depends on where you live and if that's a problem. I did a 5-foot fence around the edge of mine because there are a lot of critters. And here's another sample of a guy showing how he just attached the first board to the 4x4s. And you could use 2x4s. You don't have to use 4x4s. And then he just added more boards until he raised it up to the level that he wanted. And here's another example. Some people get really fancy with them. Here's another example where they don't even use boards. They use logs. Look at that. They're using logs, or they build like a little fence with branches. Or a lot of people use pallets. Here's one. Here's where people use sheet metal. I've got some leftover sheet metal that's kind of rusted out that I'm going to add onto my garden beds, and that may be what I use. But they just use sheet metal. Let's see. Here's an example of how these are probably just 6 to 8 inches deep, and then they put cardboard on the bottom, and then they add the dirt on top, and then you're ready to start planting. Here is another one. There's a method called the square foot gardening. There's all kinds of free information on the internet about that. I have a book called The Square Foot Gardener. And these are 6-inch boards. And then you just use twine and rope it off. And you can find out exactly how many things you can grow per 1 square foot. And like carrots, you can put 16 carrots in 1 square foot, 16 radishes, 16 lettuces, 9 green beans. And there are charts. I'm going to show you that too, so you'll know exactly what to put in there. And when you plant real close together like that, there's a lot less room for weeds. Here's a real good example. And what you can do is, if you're growing something that needs trellised, if it grows up, then you can build a trellis on one side. Like if you're planting peas, or something that grows up, or squash, then you just put a trellis on one side and plant your squash over there and let it grow up your trellis. Another thing you can do is to build a trellis up on the side of a house. I think I had an example of that. Oh, here's one where they built the trellis right in the middle of the bed. Now, what I do is I try to find plants that don't need trellising. Like, I get the bush green beans. You can buy bush tomatoes. Just look for bush plants and that don't grow very long. I grow an 8-ball zucchini, which is more of a bush zucchini, so it doesn't have to be trellised. There's another way to do a trellis. That's pretty interesting. Let's look at other beds that we can build. Look, this person is using concrete blocks. I mean, I don't know how expensive it would be to buy concrete blocks for that, but if you have some left over, this is a wonderful way. And then you can plant a plant in each of the holes around the edge, and then fill up the middle with dirt. So that's a wonderful way. Over here, this one, they're using concrete blocks and bricks. And look, they have a bed on either side, and then they use fencing to arch over it to use as a trellis. And your squash can just grow right over that trellis. Here's an interesting idea. They had a lot of bricks. They use brick for the outside. I'd be afraid that would fall loose, though. Oh, here's an idea. Here's one where they put the trellis up on the side of the house and let those plants. And you put the plants that don't trellis in the front, the ones that trellis in the back. And here's one. This shows where the outside of the concrete blocks, they put plants in it. Another thing you can do, Buy a kiddie swimming pool, a little kid's plastic swimming pool, drill a lot of holes in the bottom, fill it with dirt, and make a wonderful strawberry bed. And you could use it for lettuce and radishes and all kinds of things. But a kid's swimming pool is a cheap, easy way to have a raised bed garden. Over here, they're using pallets, and then they line it with landscape fabric and then fill it full of dirt. Of course, that would be a lot of dirt. You would want to fill the bottom full of twigs and stuff like this. Here is where they just put a little bit, I might have shown you this already, a little bit of fencing around to keep the rabbits out, I'm assuming. You could build just a little box to put on your deck and grow all kinds of stuff right on your deck railing. Where out there? Oh, here's a really, really good one. Look at this. You guys, this is amazing. Just build a frame and get buckets, 5-gallon buckets. Drill holes in the bottom. Make sure they're food grade buckets. And just grow all kinds of stuff. That's a really, really good idea. Here's one where it's lifted up, and you just take the 4x4s and put the 2x6s all around the edge, or 1x6s. Put some bracing across the bottom, put a layer of screen, and then line it with landscaping fabric and fill it full of dirt. You don't have to bend over at all. That is a wonderful idea. Here's another one, kind of like that. Yeah. You can use whatever you have. You just have to make sure that there is room for drainage, that things can drain out. And like I said, I wouldn't use lumber that's been treated. You don't want to use anything that has chemicals or anything. Here's a wonderful idea for a raspberry trellis. You could use this for any kind of a berry trellis. I would like to have a berry trellis this year, but I'm going to have to see if I can get somebody to dig some holes for me. Our ground is full of gravel, and I don't think I could dig holes and get those posts in there. But it would be nice to have berries growing. Here is a wonderful way to start plants. I do this every year. Even if you don't get started early, you can start in the winter. You just, let me see if I can show this. Yeah, you just cut the milk carton. Sometimes I just cut a hole on one side, but you cut it in half, but you leave it attached at the handle. You drill holes in the bottom. You fill it with 3 or 4 inches worth of dirt. You sprinkle a bunch of seeds in there. You tape it shut. You take the lid off, and you make sure you water it good. And then you set it outside and leave it for weeks. And it's like a little greenhouse. It waters itself. You just need to be careful when it gets like up to 70, over 70. It may get a little hot in there. Just put it in, move it to the shade. But you can start all kinds of plants, and they're ready to plant when it's time to put them in your garden. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, here's a really neat way to grow potatoes with just some 2x4s. And if you'll get on Pinterest, and if you want me to give you a link to this Pinterest board with all these ideas, because you can click on this and go to an article that explains in detail how to do all of these things. So there's, oh, and here's the soil mix. Equal parts of peat moss, sand, and topsoil. I probably don't always put an equal part of sand. And one thing that you can do, and I do this in Paducah, the city of Paducah has a compost facility, and you can get a pickup truck load of compost that has been screened, all the big pieces taken out, for $20, a pickup truckload full. But it is a little high in nitrogen, so it does need mixed well with peat moss and sand to be good soil. I have grown some things in a straight compost and they do real well. It just depends on the plant. So you just need some peat moss and some topsoil and some sand. And oh, here's another thing. That's where they're growing greens and lettuce and stuff like that in pallets. That's a good idea if you have some pallets. Here's another idea. If you have like watering troughs or things like that, you can buy those at the farm stores. So I'm hoping that'll give you guys some good ideas to get started. Now these, that should give you some good ideas. Let me give you another tip. If you go to a farm store, or if you know a farmer, farmers buy minerals and things for their cows in these great big tubs. They're about, I don't know, 2 foot tall, and they're about 2 foot wide. And a lot of the farm stores, the farmer will bring these pots, these tubs, back to the farm store, and the farm store sells them. I got them for $3 or $4 each the last couple years from the farm store. And if you know a farmer who has cows, ask him to save you those tubs and just drill a hole in the bottom, and you can plant all kinds of stuff in there. Sweet potatoes. What I do if I'm planting, I just plant herbs in them or some other things. I put a couple milk jugs in the bottom so I don't need all of that dirt, and then just fill the top 12 inches full of dirt. But I hope these are some good ideas. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I would be more than willing to help, and I'll try to start doing some gardening videos with tips and ideas. I do that every spring, and so I'll try to keep doing that. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll do anything I can to help you guys get started. Anybody that's local to me, I'm gonna have some extra plants, some starts in the milk jugs, and I'd be more than willing to share them. I'm gonna have some starts to some herbs, some medicinal herbs. And if you're having to cook on a budget, it is amazing what you can do to chicken if you just have some really good herbs to add to it. Some fresh rosemary, and if you're making spaghetti, to have some fresh basil and garlic to chop up and put in there. So there's a lot of things you can do to live on a budget and grow things yourself. So I'll try to start posting some more of that. So if you have any questions about anything that I talked about here, just let me know, and I'll be glad to help you. I love you, friends and neighbors and gardeners. Have a good weekend.